all for joining from all over the world. The unique thing about Moishe House, amongst other things, is that we're operating in 26 countries, and we are able to see what's happening both in terms of sort of city by city, globally with this pandemic, but also Jewishly. How are Jewish communities and Jewish leaders in different cities reacting and working? We're going to hear from some of the young leaders today, and actually get a little recap, because even 2 weeks, 3 weeks has been a lifetime in China and Shanghai, who we got to hear from a couple weeks back. So again, welcome, thank you, Hag Sameach. If you observed Passover, I hope it was certainly a memorable experience at the very least, and hopefully a meaningful one as well. Before I do the introductions, we also heard not too long ago from Moishe House in Rome. Moishe House in Rome was one of the newest Moishe houses on the map, and one of the first ones who had to sort of close down operations of programming or put it on pause. And I want to just share a little screenshot here of a message that they sent out to their wider community, and just a brief translation here of the bottom. We invite you to ask for your inner freedom. Only by thinking and imagining a future and a world different from what we are living today can we still consider ourselves free. We continue to see it clearly, and we often fantasize of one scene. We, 3 roommates of Moishe House Rome, and you and our friends and our other friends are at the Moishe House together. We chat, scattered around the house. We are close and free again, only this time more aware of it. So the communications and work that's been happening within the houses has been a real privilege to see. We've already had over 226 programs planned for April. Organizationally, we didn't put any program requirements on the houses for April. We'll start programming virtually and so on. We're going to hear a little bit from Roe about what some of that will look like in May. And in the meantime, if you have any tech issues, you can go to the chat, and Eden from our team is standing by and can help. And if you have any questions, you can click on the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to those questions promptly. I'm really fortunate today to have Jill Smith with us as our host for Global Voices with Moishe House. Jill's incredibly special. She's been on our board since 2013 and plays a huge role in our international work. I've had the opportunity to visit houses with her in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union and Mexico and throughout the United States. So Jill, thank you for hosting, and I will turn it over to you to introduce who we'll get to hear from today.
Great, thank you, David, and it's my pleasure to be here this morning. Good morning to everyone, I guess, in this hemisphere, and good afternoon to those in Europe, and good evening to you in China. So we're very excited to have with us residents from Budapest, from Shanghai, and from Boston. And it's so important, we feel, at Moishe House to hear from all of our residents during this really unprecedented time. Jewish young adults are seeking connections to each other and to the Jewish community. And our residents are really responding in amazing, inspiring ways, and they're giving us all hope. Our goal is to share this with all of you so that you too can feel hope and feel optimistic about the future. So a little about my involvement with Moishe House. I became a fan about 10 years ago, and David alluded to it. I visited a house in Moscow and then Kiev, and I saw firsthand how powerful local Moishe House communities were, how they became a central address for Jewish life for young people in their 20s and maybe early 30s, in places where there was no alternative for community in that age demographic. So I knew I wanted to be part of building the growth and the future of Moishe House. And so I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to join the board. So here I am today. I've been on the board since 2013 and delighted to be so. So I want to introduce our panelists today. I alluded to, we have guest residents from all over. We have 4 residents from our Shanghai house. We have Hannah Frischberg, Jeremy Kotler, Casey Brander, and David Schwartzer. They're from all over the United. Pardon?
It's Daniel. It's okay.
My apology.
No problem.
So Daniel Schwartzer. Okay. So they're all originally from the United States. They work in many different areas professionally, and Moishe House Shanghai generally works with a broad swath of Jewish life in China, which includes expats from all over the world. Eva Gatti is joining us from Moishe House Budapest, where she was born and raised. Her connection to Jewish life really grew out of a participation in Birthright a few years ago. And the Moishe House in Budapest works with many young adults who are seeking their first meaningful Jewish connection to pluralistic Jewish life. It's estimated that between 80 to 100,000 Jews live in Budapest, the largest community in Central East Europe. 90% of the Jews in Hungary actually live in Budapest. And we're also joined by Simona Gilman and Ben Suster. Is that right, Ben?
You got it, Suster.
Okay.
Thanks,
They're
Joe.
both longtime residents of the Boston Cambridge House. They both work in marketing. And the Boston Cambridge House works with a broad spectrum of Jewish young adults throughout the Boston area, and they have a Facebook group of over 1,500 young adults. And last but hardly least, one of our favorite professionals, Rowie Kruby, is joining us. He's our Moishe House Senior Director of Immersive Experiences. He oversees our Camp 999, peer-led retreats, Moishe Pods, and has helped build many foundational programs at Moishe House. Rowie's been with Moishe House for over 7 years, and he's based in Encinitas, California. So let's start with Shanghai. It's latest there, so we'll start with you first. Hannah, you were recently cleared to return to hosting events. So you're a little ahead of us all on the curve of this. And I understand you hosted a 30-person Seder, and I'm sure everyone here is very jealous given how we all went through Seders, right? So tell us a little about the current status in Shanghai and in China in general.
So things are looking up in Shanghai. Really just in the past few days, we've seen things really open up. Like you mentioned, our compound just cleared us after about a 2-week ban on visitors to have visitors come into the compound again. So that means we can actually host people in our home, which is huge. We haven't been able to do that basically since all this started.
Yeah.
And it was that when I got back, things were just starting to open up. So in the past about 6-7 weeks, it's gone from like temperature checks where they have the temperature gun at every restaurant, every office building, every place you go to, and QR code checks, which is, some people have heard about them. The government created this QR code rating system to show whether you've been in contact with someone who was potentially infected or infected with COVID. So they check for green QR codes and then also a paper registration. So they kind of had all their bases covered, and you'd have to do all 3 and make sure you're wearing a mask and sanitize your hands. And now it's kind of like some of them are enforcing one or the other, but not all of it. That's probably been one of the biggest changes, is that things are just starting to really relax. Businesses are much more open now. Daniel can probably talk more about that because he's actually in his office. And we're just seeing the city kind of come back to normal. The museums and like entertainment venues still really aren't open. Performance spaces aren't open. Movie theaters still aren't open, but like schools just were given a start date for their seniors and like the latest year, the junior high schools, and lots of good signals to see things going back to normal. And Wuhan just opened up a few days ago.
Yeah, I would say like just day to day going into an office or going to meetings, things are at like 90 or 95% capacity at this point. And even if you go out at night or you're walking around on the streets, things are probably like 80, 90%, the capacity of what they used to be before the coronavirus. So things are pretty much back to normal.
Yeah, everyone's still wearing masks.
What? Sorry, what was
Pretty
that?
robust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. People are still cautious. A lot of people are still spending more time at home, more time cooking, and like everyone's still. I was on the subway earlier today, and like people are still keeping space between them. They're not cramming into cars as much as they used to. So it's definitely, there's still an air of caution. I would say like cautiously optimistic towards life returning to normal. So we still feel it, especially since in our community, almost everyone's families are impacted now. So instead of them worrying about us, now we're worrying about them and figuring out what we can do to support our families back home. But definitely a lot better than 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. Or
Very encouraging news. Well, Jeremy is a resident of the house, but he's in Oregon. So tell us what your status is and how you've been able to contribute to what's going on in Shanghai.
Yes, so I came back to the US just before the US put up a travel ban from China. And so that was now 2 months ago. And that was really during the time when it was really intense for us in China. And so we had to move to virtual programming immediately. And I was helping everyone as we were all spread out throughout the world to start developing some virtual events to maintain a connection with our whole community, because it wasn't just the residents like in various places throughout the world, but also our community members were outside of China. And so as everyone was spread out, I helped to create an Instagram, which hadn't existed before. And we did some sort of awareness of where everyone was at throughout the world, like a photo campaign, and they like similar to Humans of New York. And then I've also, since people have been able to return to Shanghai, I've been helping to create, or I created a little weekly newsletter called Musar Mondays to, give some people like a mindfulness practice.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you had a Seder. It looked like so much fun. So how did it feel to bring everyone together in person after such a long, kind of dry time?
It felt
It was
really
nice.
amazing.
Yeah, it was really fun.
For some of our community members, it was their first time after quarantine getting to be with other people. For some of our community members, it was just their first time getting to come to something, since we had to stop in-person programming so early in the year for us. And I was really, really happy just to be able to gather, because there was a period of time that we weren't sure whether we'd be able to. We were like, yeah, we can. And then when a lot of people started coming back to China, things got a little bit more tense. So we got really lucky, and people had a lot of fun. Everyone kind of contributed to our Seder experience. So it was very participatory, and lots of good catching up, and lots of good food and wine and all the things that you want in a Seder. And so when we went through and we're talking to people about like what their favorite part of Seder this year was, what they were hoping for next year, everyone was in consensus that they wanted everyone to have the experience that we were having this year next year, the joy of getting to come back together and celebrate together, and to have that very Seder, very Passover feeling. Like we all want that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, now we move to Europe, where things have not progressed as they have in China. So Ava, Budapest just recently extended its lockdown. Can you tell us where you are right now, what the situation is, and how you all and your roommates are coping, your housemates?
Yeah, sure. So under the lockdown, we are actually allowed to go to the grocery store, the pharmacy, essential businesses. Seeing your hairdresser and manicures is still okay, which I find hilarious.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I'm not going though, but I really look forward to going. Small weddings and funerals are also okay, so people still keep those. People can actually be fined if they go out for unnecessary reasons, but as far as I see it, there are lots of people in the parks and streets not really adhering to the rules. So in my opinion, life in some ways hasn't really changed. Also, the official numbers are currently low because we aren't doing a lot of testing. So we don't actually know how many sick people are in Hungary currently.
So you and your roommates have committed yourself to leading virtual programming. So can you share with us what that looks like and how you think that will be able to sustain engagement in your community?
Yeah, so Moishe House Budapest has a unique community. Some of you might know this because most people who come to our programs have a Jewish background, but did not have a religious upbringing like me. Because our parents grew up in Soviet times and they weren't allowed to observe. You know, we aren't Jewish enough for the established Jewish community, and we are too Jewish for the non-Jews. Like that's always a problem. And there are just so many Jews like us here, and you know, there's not many places for them to go to learn and connect to the community. And Moishe House allows you to talk about being Jewish and traditions in ways that you can't really do otherwise and in other places. So during the crisis, I think we need to continue being this resource and this space for our community because people in our community have lost their jobs. You know, they are seeking a sense of belonging, connection to the Jewish community. And if they don't have a connection to Jewish life, it is actually easy to lose them.
And how do you respond to that?
Oh,
maintaining that connection.
Yeah. Actually, in so many ways. For example, we had a virtual Seder on the third night this year. And for example, one of our participants hasn't done a Seder since kindergarten. And she said that she wouldn't have done anything for Passover if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for Moishe House Budapest. Currently, it's a big challenge that many people are depressed. I think it's a global thing, actually. So our goal was just to lift everyone up. You know, we wanted to make it fun. We wanted to make people laugh during the Seder. So we asked how we can interpret Seder in the context of our lives. We led a reflection of where we are in our lives. And we did another one where we looked at where we want to go next. So kind of the process. And we also did an Afikoman escape room, which was very popular, very funny. I recommend for everyone to do something similar because it's really fun. And you know, alumni and community members were present. One guy was actually in the Netherlands on a train. Another one was in Copenhagen. The rest of us in Budapest. You know, we were just laughing so hard all night. So I think it was a really great Seder.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I think everybody's smiling. So that's great. Thank you, Eva. And before we move on to our Boston residents, I just want to remind everyone that we'll be taking questions at the end. So if you can type them into the Q&A on your screens, we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And we really want to hear from you. So please send us questions. So Simona, I understand the response in Boston has been strong from the mayor, from the governor, and I also understand confirmed cases and fatalities are continuing to rise. So tell us more about what you're seeing in Boston.
Yeah, thank you. So overall, I think that the response in Boston has been pretty good and has ramped up significantly over time. We kind of started as being one of the hotspots and then continued in that sense. So we're in Cambridge, our house is in Cambridge, and the city of Cambridge has actually been really good at keeping people updated. There's a daily case count of both confirmed cases, fatalities, and so on, and they've actually rolled out a program to test everybody in the nursing homes and care facilities in Cambridge, which is super important. not only because, we need to kind of understand what's going on there. Those counts have been added, but also for our community specifically, we have a lot of people who come to our house who work and are essential employees that are working in nursing homes and care facilities. So it's also important for us to know kind of that, they're top of mind for the city. And I think that's been the case. There's also been a lot of initiatives to kind of help out the homeless population, which is pretty big in Cambridge, and get them tested, get them housed. And we've also seen a great response from universities who are now housing people for quarantine or housing first responders who can't return home. So it took a bit for the response to ramp up, but right now I think we're rolling on a pretty good steam.
Well, that's good to hear. So Ben, Simona, tell us about Moishe House Cambridge. What does your community need right now? What are you seeing and how are you responding?
Yeah, so our community is pretty broad, both in terms of kind of what people are up to. We have a lot of people who are considered essential employees. Healthcare is a huge industry in Boston, so a lot of people are still going to work. And then we have a lot of people who are working from home, potentially even working more than they used to because, you're at home, so there's no commute. And then we have people who have unfortunately been losing their jobs because they were either employed in the service industry or for Israeli companies, including El Al, that have been forced to lay off or furlough some of their employees. So it's a really broad community in the sense of what we're doing. It's a really broad community in terms of religious observance. So we've been trying to, as usual, kind of have something for everybody in terms of really diverse programming, but also reaching out to people individually and just seeing how are they doing. We haven't seen them in a while physically, obviously, and if they're not showing up to some of our virtual programs, we want to know that if they need something from us, we can help, hook them up with other services in the community, or just talk, not under the pretext of necessarily inviting them to an event, which is also super important.
That's wonderful. Ben?
Right. So Simona said all of that perfectly. For one, our roommates and we wasted no time in I guess, understanding our role in the community and wanting to more be a resource and a place people can turn to should they need us. We've always wanted to be a house that goes beyond just 7 events a month that we put on. And we turned to ourselves, Simona, and then myself and our 2 roommates, Chelsea Rappaport and Mariah Kretsch. We turned to each other and understood immediately that, one, we're going to transition to virtual programming, no questions asked, even though Moishe House has been incredibly supportive in not requiring us to do any programming for this time, which we appreciate, but we still wanted to provide a space for people to connect now, especially more than ever, and just be a resource beyond the events as well. So one thing we did was, it felt such like a small task at the time, but I spontaneously asked the community if anybody needs Seder kits that our local federation, Jewish Federation, CJP, was distributing, since access to transportation is so severely limited. And, Mariah and I needed a kit anyways, and I just posted about it. And there was on the last day of Pesach, there was a huge response of people needing those kits. So we were able to pick up and collect 12 Seder kits for people that would not, for community members, for people that would not have done anything for the holiday otherwise. And regardless, we needed to pick up more because people requested these kits outside the time frame that we were collecting. So we picked up maybe 12 and we needed 20. And that was just within a 1 hour and a half time frame. So that is one thing we did. Something else we've been doing is something we want to do more of, especially, is bring volunteer opportunities to our community members. I've been in touch with a good friend of ours at CJP, David Newman. Shout out David. He's provided us with ample volunteer opportunities that can all be done virtually and are not Cambridge specific or contingent whatsoever. So for any viewers that want to, more virtual volunteer opportunities, whether it's translating or transcribing, there are drives to knit masks and blankets, if that is a skill you might have. Or oh wow, David's on the video. Great, hi David. The UN is providing virtual volunteer opportunities. So is the Smithsonian if you want to do biodiversity transcribing. So there's endless opportunities to volunteer. There's adopt a grandparent opportunity. So these are all things we want to bring to our community members more. And of course, I'll write out my email, our email, the Moho Cambridge email in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out for these opportunities, please reach out. And we also want to support more a local community member of ours. It's a group of community members, but headed by a regular at our house. She has thus far managed to raise, her and her team have managed to raise, as of yesterday, $18,000 for personal protection equipment for local Boston, Cambridge, medical providers and nurses. So unbelievable. We only want to support more of that. And to touch on the virtual programming, we've done things like a virtual PowerPoint party, which is something we could not recommend more. We've done so in person a handful of times.
I'm sure it's more fun than it sounds.
Oh my goodness, you have, that's a typical response.
We can send out the decks, they're hilarious.
Yeah, we have decks and PowerPoints that our community members have already put together. And if anyone wants to see examples of those, we're more than happy to send those to you. Again, I'll put the email in the chat. We've had people present on things like sloths and dogs with jobs, and is Pluto a planet? Is a hot dog a sandwich? Jeff Goldblum, of course, so on and so forth. We have endless presentation. That's been a lot of fun. We've regularly organized a mental health group where male identifying members of the community can have a space to just have not conversations that are not small talk, conversations that men would not normally really have with one another. There's no agenda. It's just let's talk and talk about what the male emotional experience looks like, and let's also examine what we talk about and what we don't talk about and why we think that is. We did that virtually, and we had maybe 12 to 15 people there. Simona and our roommates have been leading Pesach virtual events. So we just wanted to, again, just be that resource for people to turn to now more than ever, because
fantastic, very creative, and really using the opportunity in the right way. Simona, would you wrap up the Boston presentation for us?
Yeah, for sure. So I think we just want to say that we're very grateful to Moishe House as an organization for giving us the latitude to do what we as a house need to do, and for our community as well. You know, as Ben said, there was no doubt in our mind. We put it up to our board. We actually have a couple community members that help us with our programming. And when you all sent out the note that we weren't obligated to do programming, and we put it up as a question, and everybody said, of course we're going to do it. Of course we're going to do the 7-8 events that we already do, and add more things to the calendar. So both Ben and I and other housemates as well have been working with other community members that usually are running their own programs to bring them in and say, look, this is the situation. We have this platform of these 1,500 people that are in our Facebook group all over the country, alums of the house and of the community, who we can reach and engage. And so that's really great from a Moishe House perspective, and really we are very grateful for that. And then just kind of as a last point, right, we just are in the middle of Pesach, and the defining, I think, song and message for me has been Dayenu. It would have been enough. And that's something that we keep thinking about when we're planning programs. Like, this is a difficult situation. It's been something we've all had to adapt to across the world. And if we have even one successful program a month out of our 7, Dayenu, that would have been enough for us. If we have a program and we think maybe it wasn't that great, but one person comes out of that program and says, I had a great time, that's exactly what I needed this week, Dayenu. One person, that would have been enough.
So important in these times, really important. So I just, in the interest of time, I don't mean to cut you off, but we have a lot to cover and we want to be able to take questions. So thank you both. Very exciting work happening everywhere in different circumstances. I want to switch gears now and turn to Rowie. And Rowie, would you tell us about what's going on with Camp 999 and the other activities that you oversee?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. Before I launch in, I want to make sure that everyone out there listening knows that all of us here at camp and at Moishe House are sending you lots of good vibrations and love if you happen to be needing it today. And for some folks, today will be harder than others. And so just to say that we're here for you and we're thinking about all of you as we keep doing what we do best. And for us at Camp 999, it's about finding creative ways to get people to connect and engage and build community outside of their regular lives. Camp 999, our Jewish summer camp for adults, started back in 2017 and has become a sweeping movement. Last year, we sold out both camps on the East and West Coast with over 400 campers combined. And this year are still planning on launching our Midwest camp later in October near Chicago. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago, we had to make the difficult decision to postpone our East Coast camp scheduled for later in May, but immediately started asking ourselves questions around how we can bring the camp spirit to people and keep the energy high and alive. And so we asked ourselves, what is something that Jewish summer camp has to offer that is very difficult to find anywhere else? And we think one of those things is an epic color war, without a doubt. Anyone who's ever been to a Jewish summer camp of any kind has some story of a color war they remember. And so we're very excited to announce the launch of Expedition Nye, a virtual global color war experience. And color war at camp is about so much more than sports. It's about celebrating the best of our community and finding creative ways to come together and be together and celebrate each other's silliness and fun. So our global game is starting in a few weeks. It will be free to sign up and play, and anyone around the world can do it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Moishe House Shanghai puts up on the screen, and Jill, what you and your family on Shabbats submit. But the way the game will work is every Friday, starting April 24th, for 4 weeks, every Friday, a fresh new set of challenges is going to drop online. And we are going to invite anyone and everyone to compete by submitting photos and videos of themselves completing these challenges, which will be a combination of fun, educational, community engagement, and of course, rich with Jewish content. We're going to put some of the best that camp has to offer online, including our virtual play shops, as we call them. So we'll be doing science and cooking and improv and inviting you all to play, and everything will culminate on the weekend camp was supposed to happen with a live global Havdalah ceremony where we will be announcing and crowning the winners. And yeah, looking forward to seeing all of you out there on the field.
Wonderful, thank you. Boy, if this isn't an example of when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, I don't know what is. That's really terrific. Okay, I want to move to questions now. Our first question is from my friend Jim Shane in Boston. Jim, thanks for joining today. Jim would like to ask the China residents, what type of masks are you wearing and what types are required in China?
We just wear surgical ones generally. Some people wear N95s. Basically anything is acceptable. So the idea is to not get other people sick with your droplets, not so much to protect you. So it's just like anything that would create a barrier between your spit and other droplets getting on other people.
The majority of people wear surgical or like paper masks, so they're not medical grade, but they still have a water barrier. But before this, people wore masks in China anyway, and Shanghai's a polluted city, so a lot of people also have their pollution masks, which work for protecting you from getting droplets, but often have a respirator. So when you exhale, your germy breath goes out. so those, like, if they're just asking a general question, of course, N95s and K95s are the best.
But don't take them away from the healthcare workers.
But don't take them away from the healthcare workers.
Yeah.
And so for general, like, being outside, walking on the streets, the like cloth masks that people are sewing are totally fine because you're supposed to stay 12 feet away from each other anyway. But because we have supply, most people are wearing the surgical mask here.
And in offices, everybody has to wear a mask.
Yes,
you
in
have to
offices,
wear a mask when you're at the office.
All public transportation, you have to wear a mask, and then some other venues have their own rules about masks.
And pretty much everyone has either been here the whole time, or if they've come back, they've been like
They've gone through
screened
quarantine
to like and decide if they needed to go into strict quarantine or not. Everyone who's come back like recently, before they banned foreigners from coming in, went into like a strict quarantine, like could not leave their front door for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then everyone who's come in, all the Chinese citizens who have come in after the ban have gone straight into either home quarantine or hotel quarantine. So basically everyone's
you have the peace of mind that everybody has gone through quarantine and is safe at this point.
Yet everyone's still wearing a mask.
Great, thank you so much. This question is for David Siegelman, and it comes from Andrew Casper in New York. Moishe House Without Walls has paused for many hosts during the crisis. When do you think, if you have any idea, when are you thinking that Moishe House might restart activities for Without Wall hosts?
Yeah, great. Hi, Andrew. So for MHWOW hosts, the hosts who have done at least 6 programs in the last 6 months, or consider the most active hosts, are eligible right now and able to run Moishe House Without Walls programming. And the challenge is the way that we have the most onboarding for Moishe House Without Walls is when folks move out of Moishe House or when they come on our learning retreats. Well, you know, we did 130 immersive Jewish learning retreats last year between the staff-led and peer-led retreats. And that, you know, came to a grinding halt and a pause until we can gather again. So the onboarding of new MHWOW hosts is certainly slowed down, but as soon as they can gather again in groups of at least 10, we will open it up to all MHWOW hosts once again.
But is there virtual programming happening for MHWOW now?
The MHWOW hosts who have hosted at least 6 programs in the last 6 months, they are eligible and doing MHWOW virtual programming. So we saw a lot of seders and programs happening through Moishe House Without Walls. Yes.
Okay, so the next question comes from Dana Gansman. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, in Washington, D.C. For the residents in China, briefly, do you feel comfortable using public transportation now? As you probably know, a lot of cities in the States are pretty much shut down, and Dana says DC is basically shut down.
It's a lot less crowded than it was before. Like, even though we're saying things are at like 80-90%, like that still makes a big difference. Like I rode the subway recently on a line that usually you could never get a seat on, and I easily got a seat. With space between me and other people. Also getting like a cab, like we have a ride hailing app called Didi, which is basically like Uber. Like it used to be like if it was raining or rush hour, you'd have to wait like 30 minutes to get a car. Now it's like 2 minutes and one's right at your door. So it's less crowded.
Yeah, so it's relatively safe, or as safe as it could be. And for myself and a lot of people that I know, a lot of people just prefer to take taxis. There's not as much traffic as there normally would be, even though it's mostly at capacity. It's still probably safer to take a taxi than it is to take the subway, but
I'm the opposite. I'm a numbtot. For everyone who knows what numbtot is. So I started taking the subway just right after I finished my quarantine, and it's safe. They have QR codes in every single car, so you could scan the QR code, and if there was a contact in that car, they'd be able to send you a push message, like a push notification, to be like, hey, you were in this car at this time, and like you might have been like in contact with someone. So they also have the temperature checks at every station. So it's definitely like, it's way less people. Offices are staggering commutes right now.
Yeah.
And so it definitely doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel like you're putting yourself in danger anymore. But I do know a lot of people who are avoiding it.
And everyone's wearing a mask on the subway too.
Yeah.
Like, so they can't really cough on you because there's a barrier.
And some people, I think that's a takeaway that they'll have from this, is they'll wear masks in crowded places now just as a practice.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from our Katie Gilman, and this is for Ava. Are people in Budapest concerned about the extraordinary powers the leadership in Hungary has kind of seized, I'll say, during the crisis, and worried about the move to authoritarian control?
Okay, this is a funny question. I'm concerned, but I can't speak for 10 million people. Actually, a fun fact, the popularity of our current government just increased since all of this started in Hungary. I obviously think this is horrible, and I'm also kind of afraid of the consequences. It might be unrelated to some of you, but personally, I'm more concerned about this push of the government than of the coronavirus. But one more time, this is only my opinion.
All right, well, thank you, I appreciate it. I hope that answered your question, Arcady. And I want to thank everyone. I'm sorry we can't get to all the questions. We've got some time limitations, but I'd like to thank all of the panelists. I have to say that when people are, as you alluded to, feeling down and feeling like they don't know when this is going to end, you have used the time to be creative, engage people, and you give us all hope that this too shall pass, especially hearing from the residents in Shanghai, to know that there is an end in sight. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you again, and I'd like to turn it back to David.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for the residents. You are why we exist. Our tagline is inspiring Jewish homes, and you certainly are doing that better than we could imagine. And as Moishe House moves into this next phase of programming and post-Pesach, and we're going to be continuing a combination of programming in the houses and also from Moishe House International. You saw from Roe and things that we have on the slate. So please join us next week. Thank you for everybody who joined. We're going to hear from more residents hearing perspectives from around the world. I know a lot of us are wondering, what's happening with Italy and Rome. We heard from some of those residents, so we'll look to check in with them and continue to get this perspective as well from the former Soviet Union too. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for being on, and our hope is to just continue to provide information and an inside look into what's happening with young Jewish leaders around the world. So thank you very much, and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Be
And thank
safe.
you.